وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. أما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. ويسرنا في هذا الصرح العلمي المبارك جامعة تبوك أن نلتقيكم للاستماع إلى المحاضرات المتعلقة ببرنامج الدبلوم العالي والماجستير في علم النفس العيادي، والتي يلقيها البروفيسور مايكل بروفي رئيس فريق العمل لإعداد الدراسة البرنامجين، والأستاذ في علم النفس في جامعة جنوب أستراليا، وسعادة الدكتور فلاح العنزي عضو الفريق والأستاذ المشارك في علم النفس في جامعة الملك سعود. ولا يفوتنا في هذه العجالة أيها الحضور المبارك أن نسجي من الشكر أكمله ومن الثناء عطاه لمعالي مدير الجامعة الدكتور عبد العزيز بن سعود العنزي على بيض أياديه وحسن مساعيه وبذله المتواصل وجهده المترادف في كل ما من شأنه الارتقاء بهذا الصرح العلمي المبارك. كما نحمد إليه أن خص كلية التربية والآداب بباكورة برامج الدراسات العليا، والشكر موصول لسعادة وكيل الجامعة الدكتور فالح السلمي، والشكر لكم أنتم أيها الحضور المبارك والضيوف الكرام على تفضلكم بإجابة الدعوة. والآن أيها الإخوة نفسح المجال للبروفيسور مايكل بروفي للبدء في المحاضرة.
Okay, good morning. I'm thankful for the warm welcome and tremendous hospitality I've received ever since I've been in Saudi Arabia, and I've been in Riyadh and especially in Tebuk. I come from the city of Adelaide in the state of South Australia, and particularly from the University of South Australia. I'd like to say that this presentation is in collaboration with Dr. Al-Nazi from King Saud University, who has been my collaborator in the design of this program. I prepared a more extensive presentation in English, however we decided that it made more sense to talk about the majority of the program in Arabic. Therefore I will give a brief outline and overview of the topic of practical clinical psychology, and Dr. Falah will present more of the detailed materials in Arabic. I would like to acknowledge His Excellency Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Nazi, President of the University of Tebuk, for engaging me to design this program and for inviting me to travel to Saudi Arabia. So I would like to do an overview of the field of practical clinical psychology as it is practiced in most Western countries. So I want to talk about three broad issues. First one is what I call the conceptual base. What's the rationale for this approach? And secondly, to talk about training, models of training in clinical psychology. And finally, I'll talk about ideas of how we develop and maintain clinical psychology practice in Saudi Arabia. In Western clinical psychology, we currently talk about the notion of evidence-based psychological practice. So this means broadly that we have an ideal of practicing our psychological interventions as far as possible with the support of research evidence. And we use that research to guide us towards the best interventions to help people with mental health problems. Rationale for practical clinical psychology. I want to talk now about the structure of training. And I'll give some international comparisons. So we can first talk about the United States. So what is the structure of
clinical psychology training in that country. This is probably the longest training throughout the Western world, certainly. In the United States, psychologists will do an undergraduate degree and then they'll do postgraduate study which can last up to 6 years and usually includes a doctoral degree and a large amount of experience in the workplace, practicum experience. Now there's a question of whether it's really necessary to train for this length of time, and certainly the United States stands out as the longest training. As we'll see, other parts of the world tend to have a fairly similar amount of training. For instance, in the United Kingdom, we have broadly 6 years of training to lead to the basic skills needed to be a clinical psychologist. So this consists of the academic foundation of undergraduate psychology study, studying the fields of general psychology across cognitive psychology, social psychology, all of those areas, plus some study of abnormal psychology, study of psychological disorders. People then go on to advanced training, which is about applying this knowledge to the treatment of psychological problems, and training in the skills and practice and in the workplace in order by the time they graduate that they have enough experience to be independent clinical psychologists. In Europe, there's historically been many different frameworks and it's different throughout many countries. But more recently, European countries have got together across all sorts of fields, and there's the so-called Bologna Declaration, and this is designed to facilitate professional people to move across different countries of Europe and to have their training recognised in a different country from where they're trained. And this is in its early stages, but broadly what they're aiming to do is to have uniform standards across Europe in most countries. Now they differ somewhat, but the majority framework looks something like this. Again, that there would be an academic foundation of 3 years of undergraduate psychology study. There would be advanced training in a university setting for 2 years, and that would be at least the beginnings of some real practical training with patients. And finally, there's a last year which is outside the university and where people work in internships similar to medical internships, and they're under the supervision of more experienced psychologists. So again, that's a 6-year model of training. In Australia, we also have 6 years. It's structured slightly differently, that we have an academic foundation of 4 years of undergraduate training, and that's followed by advanced training and practice over 2 years. And this includes skills training in applying psychology knowledge to psychological disorders, and then actually supervision of trainee psychologists in mental health workplaces. So this also adds up to 6 years. So broadly, across most of the world, 6 years is the standard for independent psychological practice. Now, what we have proposed for the University of Tebuk is broadly similar to the Australian model. So after theoretical and psychology training, the postgraduate training to be offered here consists in advanced training in coursework to apply